Hi, welcome back to the shop. Welcome to Shop Talk. We'll go slow here to get started, give folks a few minutes to come in, but tonight we're going to work on some wee stuff. I realized that when I made the belly box, cartridge box for Cat, I made some tools to go with that you use for maintaining and working on your musket. And I realized that I only had one set and I have a couple of cartridge boxes, so I should make myself another set. And it might be a good thing to show on the stream. So tonight we're going to make a napping hammer used for refacing the flint of a flintlock musket or pistol. As you're using it, as you're shooting it, that flint is going to be chipped and worn down. You might want to put a new sharp edge on it. And we're going to make a vent pick for clearing out powder fouling from the vent. I'll show you one, assuming we finish these successfully. When we make one, I'll show you how it works on a gun. And if we have some time, we might make a brush, although I'm missing the right gauge wire. Mine's a little bit too big, but it would still work. We'll see if we get time for that tonight. So we'll see if anybody pops into the chat. I'm watching the chat, so if you have questions about what I'm doing, please feel free to ask. And of course, this will be posted on YouTube in a couple of days, so you can always go back and follow along. If you do want to follow along, I'll show you some of the tools that I'm using tonight and the materials, so you can pick up your own. This is not a hard project. We're not using a forge. We're going to be work hardening and cold forging everything tonight. So if you have some chunk of metal to pound on, a hammer, some really basic tools, you could probably follow right along with what we're doing tonight. So the stock, the material that we're going to be using for, let's start with our pick. We'll start with the simplest thing. We'll work our way up to the more difficult stuff. We're going to be using some brass rod. You want to make sure that you don't buy something called brass NA. That's available all over Amazon, and that is like a zinky, steely, nasty kind of wire that is brass plated. You don't want something that's plated. The reason we're going to be working with brass and copper tonight, non-ferrous, non-iron metals, is so that we don't have an independently minded exothermic reaction, i.e. a boom that goes boom when we don't want it to go boom. We're going to be working with a flint, potentially hitting a flint with a hammer right over a pan of gunpowder. So we want to make sure that we're going to be using a metal that is not going to create a hot spark like an iron hammer could. So you want to make sure you get the right stuff. You'll know immediately if you cut into your brass rod and it's white on the inside, that's bad. A good way to get a hold of this stuff, if you have a hard time finding it, is to buy brazing rod, brass brazing rod. Which is used, brazing is sort of a cheap and easy version of welding. It's metal gluing. And the rod will often come with a white powdery casing on the outside of it. That's the flux that allows the metals to join. Just scrape that off, and inside you usually have some really nice, high quality, pure brass rod. And this is, how big is this? This is about 100 thousandths of an inch. Tenth of an inch. What does that convert to in difficult to understand measurements? Machinists work in a decimalized version of inches because it's a whole lot easier to work in things cut into tens. Funny, we could just use this system that everybody else uses called metric, but no. This is about a 16th of an inch. That's probably how you see it on Amazon. But it's about, I don't know, thickness of a finishing nail, give or take. So we're going to need a piece of this. We're going to need about yay much. We're going to put a round hook on one end of it and just sharpen up the other end. So something about like that. And I'm going to cut that with whatever I have around. You could use a hacksaw. I have a pair of heavy bolt cutters or heavy wire cutters. We're just going to snip that off. It's really nice to work with non-ferrous metals. They're soft, they're easy to work with. So I just gather myself a piece about like that. The other stock that we're going to use next is this piece of brass rod. This could be a little bit trickier to get your hands on, but again, you should be able to find it on Amazon. If you don't have any luck with that, go to like your local flea market or salvage store, garage sales, and look for lamps. Lamps often have some, especially older ones, some really nice brass furniture in them that you can repurpose for other things. And we're only going to need about an inch of this material at most. And this is This is about 375 thousandths of an inch, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, about close to half an inch. It's about, oh, there we go. 1, 2, 3/8. It's about 3/8 in diameter. But you can, this doesn't have to be exact. Anything to make a little hammerhead. We're going to use a copper nail or copper rod if you have it. I like the nail because it already has half of my peening, my rivet that's going to hold the hammerhead on built into it. Use one of those. And if we get into the wire brush, we'll need some wire and some copper tubing for that. And this whole thing, traditionally 18th century, would sit often on a brass chain like this. I could do that. You could have a whole, you have a set of your tools all hanging off your cartridge box or off your belt. But I find the chain gets tangled. I tend to just use strips of leather or hemp cord, some kind of small stuff. But if you wanted to be a fancy dandy, you could use some chain to hold it all together. And then we're going to need various types of pliers, specifically for this first step, which is going to be bending a loop into the end of this. And if I just grabbed a hold of your standard needle nose pliers, grabbed a hold of that and bent it, it would work, and I'd probably get something that looked a little weird shaped, and I would mar the ever-loving life out of the brass. I would put a whole bunch of teeth marks in it, because you can see, focus, you can see that there are teeth inside your pliers, which are generally great. Okay, you can hold on to stuff. But if you're making fancy stuff like jewelry or what we're doing today, I don't want those tooth marks to translate into my brass. So I'm going to use, I'll probably use these. This is an antique pair. If you look at these pliers, these are wire bending pliers or loop making pliers. They are round, mostly. It's a little flattened from, probably 125 years of use, but they're round jaws with no grip. They have no teeth cut into them. This is a more modern pair with different sizes. See? Focus. You can see that you can make different size loops, and it is smooth and round so that we're not going to mar it. The other thing I will want for doing this, you make jewelry? If you make jewelry, these should look very familiar. I just bought these. They're really cool. I've been getting away with this little antique pair for years, but bought myself a nice pair. Yeah, the antique ones are great. Just don't mistakenly grab these when you want to like wrench a nail out of a 2x4 because you'll screw them up. These are for a very specific task. And we're also going to want some kind of a file. You can see when I cut this off, I got a ragged edge. So this end, think about whenever you're working with metal, you have to think about your order of operations. What do I have to do first so that I don't get stuck and not be able to do that task because I'm going to bend this end around. Really hard to file it after I do that. So I can just take a file, smooth off any nastiness that's on the end of that so I don't have any sharp bits. Again, working with brass, super easy because it's soft and malleable. So we'll just make that look good. Just with a little metal file. Nice little round end. Okay. Now, again, nice thing about brass is it is soft enough that we can just grab hold of this. I'm using the larger. You can see these are made to make multiple sizes of loops. I'm going to use the larger. I'm just going to grab that and literally with my fingers bend this right around these pliers, using them like a jig. Create the size of loop that I want. All the way around. And I made a loop. Yay, loop. Easy, right? It's a little bit off center. Center everything up. And so that you can see what I'm doing tonight, I have moved my anvil, my small anvil, right up here onto the bench. I normally don't, whoa, sorry about that. Come back. I normally don't recommend having an anvil on a workbench because it's not nearly the solid base that you want, but for tonight, we're going to work up here so that you can see what I'm doing. Basic anvil anatomy, I have a face. This is a hardened steel face. For doing the majority of your work, you have an edge for making bends, 90-degree bends, or I guess you can stop at any point you want. This is the horn of the anvil. This is for making loops and bends. This one happens to have another little flat horn on the back, which is kind of useful. These holes are your hardy holes. Those are where you will insert your hardy tools. I don't have any here in this shop that fit this smaller hardy size at the moment, but think of something that goes in there for making jigs for bending things around, cut-off hardies for cutting off hot metal. We're not going to heat up this metal tonight because it is just brass and we don't need to. We're going to be work hardening the brass tonight, which think of this piece of metal having a crystalline structure, okay? All of its little pieces are nicely aligned in a pattern. That's great, except it makes it flexible, makes it bendable, because they're all lined up. I'm going to actually, dislocate some of that crystalline structure. When I hammer on this, it's going to get progressively more difficult. And that's good, because by doing some hammering on the working ends of these tools, I can work harden them. I can dislocate some of that crystalline structure, rearrange it so that it doesn't slip. The crystals don't slip past each other quite as easily, and make a harder piece. And this is how, think Bronze Age swords, Bronze Age tools, they were made hard by some heating, treating, like we do with modern steel, but mostly by work hardening. If you take a piece of bronze that you have cast and you hammer it out into a sword, awesome. That process of manufacturing has turned it into a much harder tool. You can remove that by heating it back up and annealing it and realigning the crystalline structure so you can go back and rework it, or maybe you want it to be a soft tool, you can fix that. But in this case tonight, we're going to be doing some work hardening. And honestly, most of what we're going to do is on the grinder and with the file, because all we have to do is put a point on that. But before I do that, I do want to do a little bit of anvil work. This is all great. It's a loop. It would hold it on, but I want to close this up a little bit, and I want to put a little bit of an offset in the loop. So rather than the loop being way off to the side, I'm going to put a little question mark shape into it. Doesn't matter. In this case, it's mostly for looks. If this were a pin that was being driven into something, or a bigger iron piece like a tent stake, if I was hitting on this, the force is going to be going down about 1/2 inch away from the shaft of the piece, whereas if I put an offset in, if I bend this loop so it's all in line, the force will be going down my piece. Let's do a chat check. Mostly bronze stuff was cast and then filed to its shape, but you can certainly do some hammering on it and shaping as well to give you that work hardening, and they certainly understood that. Dino? Is there a dinosaur? There are little bits and bobs and toys all over my shop. I like it. Okay, we need a hammer. We need something to hit a thing with. Let's use just a small ball-peen hammer. First, I'm just gonna align that. Everything's sorted out. I'm gonna come to my horn. I'm gonna place. Come see. I'm going to place this here. Now, if this was an iron piece that I was putting an offset in, I would heat it up in the forge about this section, and then I would cool down in water the end to allow me to hit it without deforming it and leaving just the heat here. It looks like this does look like a bit like a dinosaur horn. Although there are also dinosaurs stuck up in my shop in various places. So wherever this piece of metal is contacting the horn of the anvil, that's where the work is going to be done. That's where the bend is actually going to happen. So if I put it here and I hit it there, doing a couple of things. I'm closing that loop And I'm putting that question mark shape in. A little bit hard to hold on to this small stuff, but that's okay. That's all I'm going to do. See? Oop, there. So we put an offset in. We lined everything up all nice over our piece. And now we just need to put a sharpened bit on there. Come with me. My shop is small, but there's still space to walk. Okay, come over here. We're going to use some tools on the smoothing and removing table. The sanding table. All I'm going to do is use the bench grinder, put a point on this. Easy enough. Safety glasses. Actually, I have a, that's the extent of my cord. Okay. I have a disc on my disc sander that's about at the end of its life. Here is that. Just roughly shaping a point into that. I will clean it up with a file. I can also clean it up right here. A little bit of sandpaper. What is this? This feels like, yeah, 80 grit. This is a machinist block. It's just a piece of flat marble. Go to your local counter store. Ask them for a broken piece of marble. And this is great for sanding on parts because I know it's a flat surface. It's a solid surface. And I can just do some quick sanding on this. You do a lot of work on brass with sandpaper. I'll call that good for the moment. Getting the grand tour of the shop tonight. Thank you. Love the workshop. I like this space. This is nice tonight. I've been doing a lot of digital projects the last couple weeks. Upstairs on the computer, so it's nice to come down here and work on something practical. So we just put a little point on that. Again, I can clean it up. I'll probably bring that taper back a bit so that I can get in a little bit deeper to the vent. Mercy says it looks like and you got starred out, so I don't know what inappropriate word you used. I can also use my file, set it on the bench. Same thing I was doing on the sandpaper on the block. Brass, bronze are great things to work with, especially in a home shop, because they don't really generally require fire. And they're very easy to work. And so I'm just bringing that taper back a little bit so I'm sure that I can get all the way into the vent on the Musket, which is generally not going to be more than 1/4 of an inch, but they can be fairly narrow sometimes. So we'll just remove a little more material from that. It starred out dinosaur. I don't know. No idea why Twitch would consider dinosaur, you gotta say it like Jurassic Park, dinosaur, to be a bad word. You were not trying to be inappropriate this time, says Mercy. Well, okay, good. Not this time. Generally. And nobody minds. Okay. There. That's done. That's a tool. That's finished. Let's put that on our little fancy chain. You know, these are useful. I have one that I carry in my modern camping kit in my repair kit. It's a little bit shorter than this because that kit is made out of a an Altoids tin, so it fits in there. But boy, sometimes you just gotta poke at stuff, and you need a poker. So that's what we made. We made a pick. Cool. Told you that was the easy one, right? Easy one's done. Let's put that aside. Let's make something with multiple parts. Let's make a napping hammer. So the first thing I need to do is cut off the amount of material that I want from this. So we're gonna come over here. Bring it a little bit closer. I'm gonna use a hacksaw. Okay. Just a metal cutting blade on a hacksaw. I could open my bandsaw up and turn the gearing down and make it slower, but that's a bad idea. I'm going to put it in a vise, and I'm going to cut it off properly. Keeping 10 fingers and getting a small piece of brass. Okay. Put this into my vise. Making sure that it is level-ish in the vise, so that I know that if I cut straight down, I should have something fairly close to a straight cut. And then it goes tink under something and you lose it forever. Ah, come back. There you are. Okay. Got it. There's my piece. Okay, so there's my piece of stock. There's my file. Some little nastiness on there that will get off. And this is going to become my hammer. I don't want it just this shape, though. I want a hammer shaped like this. I want to have a flat face on one side, and I want to have a chisel on the other side. This is the side that is best for napping flint. It's going to give you that new sharp edge that you want. So that's going to be just done on the bench grinder. I think I'll do that last-ish. So that I put a handle on first, then I have something to hold on to on the grinder, and my fingers don't end up in the grinding wheel. Okay. To do that, first, this or this are going to become our handle. I've yet to decide which one I exactly want to use. Let's see. If we put that through there, that's a little bit on the big side. That's probably overkill. I forget which I used for cats. That's not terrible. You don't need a big, long handle on this. You're just tapping at it. So I think that that's the right size. So what we need to do is find a drill bit. Actually, I have one in the middle. Do I have a nail in the middle? I do. I'm going to use this nail. I've already, for some reason, cut the end off of this. Probably have another one. That's perfect. That's in the middle. We're going to use this size. Whatever nail size this comes down to, I don't know, but it's about 148 thousandths in diameter. You could use copper or brass rod. I'm just using this copper nail because, again, I have it and it already has a head on one end of it. And hopefully, we put a hole in this. The nail is a little bit wider as you get up towards the head, and it also has this little bit of riffling in it. And hopefully that's going to grab the head, and then all we have to do is sort of peen over the top a little bit, and it will stick. So I need to select a drill bit that is going to be a little bit smaller than this, because I want... Why is there a drill bit missing? I hate it when I see that. It's probably on my... It's not on my drill. It's somewhere. So we're going to pick out a drill bit that is a little bit smaller, and then I can actually force these two parts together. Not really weld them, but force them together close enough. That one's a little big. I could look at the sizes, but there we go. Yeah. If it's that size down at that end, it's probably still a little bit big. I'd rather drill too small of a hole and have to make it bigger. There we go. That's what I want. Just a little bit smaller than the piece of stock, because I can always remove stuff from this or make the hole a little bit bigger with a round file. Okay. Little late to ask, what am I making? No, it's never too late to ask what I'm making. We are now moving on to making a napping hammer. There is one on the... I didn't bring a real one with me. That way I don't have any standards to meet. There's a picture of the one that I made for Kat on the Facebook post for this this video, if you want to see a finished product. I put quite a bit of care and attention into that one, so we'll see how well we do tonight. But a napping hammer is used to reface a flint and a flintlock. These are the tools that you have right on your cartridge box, right on your belt, that you need constantly. Every 10 shots or so, you're probably going to need to see to your flint and clean out your vent. So that's what we're making, is that sort of ready to go set of tools. So we need to put a hole through that with this without putting a hole through our hand. I know I'm picky. So we're going to use the drill press for that. I could most certainly, let's see what get you over here at the drill press. There we go. I could absolutely do this in full 18th century style if I wanted, using something like a bit and brace, a hand drill, but we're going to use the drill press. And how do I want to vise this? This is always a question. I think we're just going to use this drill press vise. This is just your standard flat vise. Considered for a second using a V-block. This is a V-block used specifically for holding round various bits and parts, but I think the clamps for these V-blocks are in my shop in the garage. So we're gonna, where the bigger drill press is. So we're just going to put this into here, and that's okay because we can grab hold of it right there. I'm going to grab a small block of sacrificial lumber. I do not want to drill into the bottom of my vise, but this piece is too small to bridge the gap. So I'm going to put a piece of wood in there just to span that gap and give this something to sit on and something for the drill bit to end up in. So I need to make this smaller. There's a very enthusiastic team of beavers right behind the camera. There we go. Now I made that a little bit oversized, but that's okay because wood compresses. We'll just crunch that down. Oh, maybe still a little big. We'll crunch that down until we actually get to our brass. If this was something super delicate that I was working with, I would want to pad these jaws with some leather if it was something like a piece of jewelry that I was working on or something, but in this case I'm not going to worry too much. Alright, I do though want to make sure that that goes in there level, which this piece of lumber is not. There we go. I'm just eyeballing this, but what I'm eyeballing right now is to make sure that the piece of stock is level to the jaws of the vise, which I know are level to the platform of the drill, so that I don't get an angled hole. Hey, that's not going to matter too much with this piece, there we go. There's our vicing operation. We've got a sacrificial piece of wood on the bottom. We've got our piece that we're going to drill, and then eventually we will clamp this to the table. So let's insert our drill bit. Probably drop our table a touch. Just like that. Yep, we're going to put a hole right there. I am going to mark that hole. Let's check the chat. I answered all the questions. Yay. We're going to mark this first with a center punch. This is sort of hit it on the back style center punch. And just so that I have a guide hole for the very end of the drill bit, because I could probably just drill this as is, but the drill bit, it's hard to see without it spinning. We'll want to walk. You'll want to bend and move on, especially this round stock, even though it's relatively soft. So I'm going to give it just a little bit of a mark as a place to start. So we need a hammer. If I had a hammer. Okay. I'm doing this down out of sight, sorry. See that? I can see that. Now you can see that. This should be hardened steel enough that... Oh, that was horribly done. Let's try that again. There we go. Just enough of a dimple, and I sort of depressed my piece. So we'll just readjust that a little bit. If there are any real machinists watching, you're going, what is he doing? This is the cheap and easy way to do it. Okay. Now I have, I think, just enough of a dimple there that the drill press, the drill bit, should have enough purchase that it won't walk all over the place on me. And you could do this with hand tools if you wanted as well. All right, so I'm going to line up where I want that to be. I'm going to check it from this end as well to make sure that I'm centered on both axes. I'm centered in the the middle of the piece horizontally, and on the axis going that way. And then this is nothing high speed, nothing hardened. So we're just going to stick a couple of spring clamps on our vise. Okay, safety glasses are on. Let's try to make a hole. Getting just a little bit of oil in there. Blow that off because I put some oil in for cooling and lubrication of the cut. But I think we made it through successfully. It got a little squirrely, it'll loosen the vise, but we got a hole. Yay! That's all I needed. All right, let's clean this off. Now, if that was hardened steel, my life would be much more complicated right now. And I would have had to go much slower with cutting fluid and everything else, but in this case, we're working with very soft material. I'm just going to use my file. I'm not being too precious with this piece because it's going to get hit on the wire wheel, and maybe if I'm feeling really fancy on a buffing wheel. We're just going to take off the sharp bits from that. Okay, now in theory, if that hole is big enough, yeah, that'll fit through there. And it gets tight, which is good, because what I'm going to do is drive that down through there to make my fit. So because these are both relatively malleable metals, I'm just going to place this on the vise, drive that down, and it will be as permanent a fit as we need to, and then I'll just use my hammer to bend over into a rivet at the top of that, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere, especially with this ribbing on the nail. So let's do that. I'll bring with me a hammer. I got a hammer. Just come over here. I'm just using the vise as a riveting block to support that. And we're just going to put our handle in. Yay! Wasn't as tight as I expected, but that is, in general use, daily use, I don't think that's going to come off of there. I can put a little bit of solder or something on if I want to at some point. So I think we're just going to, it's a little looser than I would like. But doing that is probably going to help. Oh yeah, that's on there. I bent it a little bit. I can fix that if I want. Or actually that little angle is probably not a horrible thing. And now with that peened head, that is not going to come off. And I'll clean that up. I'll smooth it out on the grinder as well. Let's just bend that back for looks. Just go to the anvil. If this is a little wavy, I don't care. Okay, I actually kind of like that. We're getting a little serpentine shape to the hammer handle. Cool. All right. Next step would be, next step before I do my grinding is going to be to work this end. And we're going to actually work that into a piece of chalk. Is this right on this? Oh, yeah, that writes on that. Sweet. We're going to try to shape this copper nail into something that very much like what we did with the brass looks like that. So a little curly Q with an offset so that we have something to hang it on. And this is just going to be pure work hardening. We're just going to draw it out a bit. You can end up in a problem where you start splitting. You can start to split metal like this, but if we do that, we'll just kind of weld it back together and we're kind of undoing our peening, but we can fix that. So drawing out is just taking a thicker piece of metal and drawing it out into a smaller piece. I see we're spinning inside the hammerhead. Seeing little bits of copper go, so I'm putting my glasses back on. I'm not being too careful with its final finish because this is all going to get worked on the grinder as well. We are sort of spinning that in the hammerhead, but we can fix that after as well. When in doubt, get a bigger hammer. There's that splitting I mentioned right there. That's okay. I'm trying to make this thinner anyway. I think that is drawn out enough. I'm going to just grind it off. It's going to take just a second. Oh yeah, you should probably put hearing protection on. What? Be right back. Okay, I just worked that a little bit on the grinder and the belt sander to smooth it out, round it out a little bit. And then we're going to better dump some water on it because it'd be warm. Oh, there we go. Much better. Yeah, anvils are loud. That's the sound you want to hear, though. That ringing sound, that's good hardened steel on hardened steel. All right. Now, this is probably quite hard at this point because we have been work hardening it, but I'm going to try just manually bending it. Oh, yeah, we can. Oh, did we break it? This can get a little bit to the brittle point as well. But no, we didn't break it. We just slipped a little bit. Okay, so I just put a loop in the end of that. We're going to kind of finish that loop around so that it will hold whatever we tie it to, and put just a little offset in it, same as we did with our brass pick, so that we get something that looks like that. Now if it's out of shape at all, we can fix that, but that's the vague shape that we're going for. This is all one of the more difficult things actually about working with this soft material is it's soft. And it can bend when you don't want it to sometimes. Just reattaching that peen a little bit. I will probably put a little bit of solder on that just to make sure that I hold it where I want it. But in general, I'm kind of liking that shape. Let's bring this around so it matches the front of our hammer. Yeah. Just twisting that ring so that it matches, lines up with our hammerhead, which is difficult because that is twisting at the moment, but we'll fix that later. Kind of like that little curve in it. That's cool. All right. Yeah, that's the basic shape that we're looking for. Let's cut in our angle to it, our bevel to it, and you could do this with a file if you didn't have a grinder. Have a grinder. That's the shape I'm looking for. I've created that type of a hammer shape on my brass hammer, and that will be perfect for napping at the flint. And there's finish work to do. Obviously, I'm gonna sit here with a file, round off all of those sharp edges. Let's do just a quick pass now. And again, like I say, if you're working with just hand tools, that's fine. You can put this in a little vise, or even just hold it in a pair of pliers, and you could absolutely file that shape in totally by hand. It wouldn't take but half an hour at most. But I just take the bulk of the material off with the bench grinder. And I can file that down until it's a little hard to see, until all of the tool marks from the grinder are gone. I don't really want any sharp edges on this because it's going to be tied to my belt, so. And then I would also, I just need to fix that with, I don't know, drop of solder, heat it up a little bit. But that's what we're looking for. There's a napping hammer. We've got our shaped brass head. We've got a copper handle, little loop to tie it to. It's attached mostly at this point, and we've shaped it. So hit this with a wire brush, file, smooth everything down, clean up all the edges, and you'd have a serviceable little tool. Yeah. And that would also, if we want to be fancy, oh, our chain's too big. Oh no. This is going to go and hang alongside our pick. And there are two of your musket tools. We're coming up on just about an hour, but let's at least show you the procedure for making the brush, even though mine's going to be a little wonkadoodle because I only have 22 gauge wire, and it's 22 gauge copper. I really want something like 24 at the biggest. Think like a wire brush. This is a little bit on the big side. It's not quite as springy and flexible as I want, but I can still go through the whole process with this. Let's put those on our anvil. Get our nice thumbnail shot on the anvil there. Yeah. So I'll show you the procedure with this. So if you want to make one of these, you'll know what to do. Just get yourself some lighter wire. Like I said, this is 22, which is a little bit too big, and of course gauge, the bigger the number, the smaller the wire. So if you can get like 28, that would be awesome. Or if you've got an old wire grill brush that's brass bristles, cut some off and use them. Yeah, it might be a little tricky if they're not long. And what I'm going to need to create this piece is a piece of brass tube. If I wanted to be true proper 18th century about it, I could start with a piece of sheet brass, I could roll it, I could solder up the edge, and I could put a back on it. Or I can use a pistol cartridge. I think we're going to use a, what do we have? Winchester 357. Mag? Looks like a Magnum. Yep, 357 Magnum from my revolver. And this is a brass tube with a back on it already, so it's perfect. I do want to shorten it a little bit, so I'm just going to take it over to the sander. I'm going to take, I don't know, half an inch off of that, and then we'll remove the primer to make us a hole to put the wire through. You see where this is going. So let's make this shorter. Focus. Focus. shortened and deburred. Deburred, what do you have against the birds? They're an average band. Okay. So I just made that a little bit shorter. Took off all of the harsh bits on the end. I could be a little more careful. I could probably... So that's the primer on the end, which obviously has been fired because it has a firing pin mark. That's good because I'm going to put a drill bit into it. You could probably just knock that out with a punch, just a nail or a piece of metal. Could probably de-seat that primer and make yourself a hole, but I'm just going to go over to the drill press and I'm going to drill a hole in it. Drill press cam. Okay. Move these guys. I could do it in the space, but this is really a time for the V-block, and we're going to do this in an unorthodox fashion. We're going to mount it, because I have the lip of the cartridge, I'm going to mount this vertically in a V-block. And I've done this before successfully. I'm just going to mount that to the V-block with a C-clamp. Which, if all goes well, will be offset enough to allow the drill bit to come in. There we go. There we go. You can. There are special clamps specifically for the V-block, but you can see what that's doing physically. It's grooved, so it's holding that round piece of stock in a nice way. Perfect. I know that it's perfectly vertical because it's sitting in that slot, and yeah. I have a feeling this whole primer is going to pop out, so I'm just going to start drilling with this size. Hopefully it'll come right out. Drilled out our primer. Recycling. Upcycling, that's what we're doing. There we go. So now we have a nice hole in the back of that. Alright. A little bit of mangled brass on the top. We'll get rid of that. While I'm at it, I can get rid of the part that says Winchester 357 Magnum, because that is not historically accurate. Well, not to this time period anyway. I mean, if somebody really looks at this, they're going to go, "Oh, cool! You recycled a pistol cartridge," but from a distance, it looks like a brass tube. Most of the markings off, smooth that out. Anybody have fun weekend plans? Beyond this, of course. I'm going to get back down in here tomorrow, make something else. I don't know what yet. I should work on boxes. I have about 3 or 4 camp chests reenacting boxes that are in disrepair to put back together. Do a little woodworking tomorrow. There, I've just got most of the markings off. We've got our hole drilled. We're going to take our wire, however much you think you need. I would use probably 2 or 3, about 2 meters if you're using the proper weight stuff. I'm going to go a little smaller or a little shorter because this is heavier. Cut that, and we're just going to double it. Put a fine crimp in our bend. Double it again. Crimp that. I'm actually going to start as it gets heavier. I want these to be sharp bends because it needs to go all through that hole. Double it again. you see where this is going. We're making a brush. This might be too much of this heavy gauge wire. We might get one more out of it. Bend it. On the last one, I don't want to crimp it over, so I think for me tonight, that is going to be my last one. If it was lighter gauge wire, I'd want to see about twice as many bristles down at the end. And all we'll do is snip those off at the end. But I think this is about all I'm going to get through for this heavy gauge wire. Yeah. So then I'm just going to make these as compact as I can on the end. I'm not crimping this one because that's going to be I'm actually going to do that right now. I'm going to put some type of a loop through, something that I can hang this on. And I think I'm going to try, I've tried this before. Got some little brass washers. I think that would make a nice loop. If you have any kind of a small brass ring, we're really just looking for something that's going to act as a retaining piece on the end and give you something to tie through. So we'll just put that on there ahead of putting it in. And then we're just going to feed all of this wire through our hole. Oh, it's going to be a tight fit, but it fits. Obviously, I have more length here than I need because I wasn't able to make that last fold, given that this wire is a little too big. We're just going to pull that through right up to our ring, whatever that retaining ring decides it's going to be. Give it a good little smushy smush. These are all technical shop terms, and I like to give it a twist at the top there as well. And obviously this washer is a little bit on the big side. You could reduce that or use some other type of ring. If you're putting it on a chain as your way of carrying it, now would be the time to put that chain right in there and make it a permanent fit. And that is, I'm not going to get the soldering iron out tonight, but that would also be a spot. Put a little bit of solder on there, and that will close that joint right up. And obviously this can be as rough or as fancy as you want it to be. You could also, I've done it before with a larger cartridge, put a hole on either side. It's a little tricky to do without knocking the primer out, but if you put two holes, then you can feed your wire through, reach up with a thin pair of pliers and twist it on the inside, and that'll lock it in place without having to do any soldering or anything up on this end. And then what we do is just decide how long we want them to be, cut them off, and of course that cuts off all of those loops. Spread your little bristles out, which, bearing in mind these are a little bit on the hefty side, and you made a brush. And because your pan of your musket is hardened steel, this nice soft stuff is going to not really hurt the pan, but it gives you something, and keeping in mind these are a bit on the heavy side, but you can imagine that as a thinner bristle. That allows you to just get into the pan. Let me grab a musket. Here is our standard flintlock. Bring that back to half cock, and I'll show you what these three tools that we have made to 80% completion actually do. So this, obviously with thinner bristles, is going to be for getting into the pan. Make sure we can see that. Getting into the pan here, which is where your priming powder is, and gets absolutely full of fouling, spent powder, and especially if it was a humid day like today. So you're going to get in with that brush, and you'll be able to scrape all that stuff out. And then our pick, which honestly, this is just a straight pick, which works good on authentic setup guns. When you have the flash guard, which is a safety device to keep sparks from going into your guy next to you's face, it's a little bit tricky to actually get into there. So you can make a curved, just take this and give it a curve on the end, like that. And you can actually customize this to your particular geometry of your musket. And it'll happen over time whether you want it to or not, if you don't. But now I can get in behind that flash guard and see that fits. Actually tapered that just about right so that it fits right inside there and helps to clear out fouling. This is the vent hole, which is allowing sparks from the pan, ignited by the flint, to go in through that hole and ignite my primary charge inside the breech. So this, actually that one fits really nicely on this gun. Will allow me to get in there and clean that out, which you have to do every, depends on the humidity of the day, every 10 shots or so. Today might be every shot because it's raining out. So that's what that tool does. And then our napping hammer. So generally what you're going to do is you're going to load your musket, you're going to go to fire it, it is not going to fire. And if you don't see any spark, it means that your flint has become dull, in which case you pull your hammer back at half cock, close your pan so that you don't get moisture onto that priming powder or any sparks on it, and then you'll use your newly made napping hammer here, and you'll tap at your flint, break off little bits of it, and create a new sharp edge. And then hopefully pull it back full cock, try it again, and hopefully you'll get a spark. Yeah, it usually works. So there's our 3 main tools. We've got a little whisk, we've got our napping hammer, and we have a now customized for this gun vent pick, or yeah, cleaning pick. So if you want a good little, goodness, that took me an hour while I was talking. You could probably do it in a half hour. Quick little home metalworking project that makes a really useful set of tools for maintaining and keeping your musket firing in the field. There you go. Obviously these need a little bit of finish work, cleanup, give them a little bit of filing, work on the wire brush. I could buff them up if I wanted to, and then figure out what type of retention system I'm going to use. And all made out of non-ferrous metal so that we don't have any sparking when we don't want it. All right. Let's take a couple minutes if anybody has any questions about anything before we go. Be happy to answer them. If you do make anything like this, make sure we see pictures, because that'd be cool. Yeah. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. I'll take some pictures of this stuff, put it up on the Discord, and this video will go up onto YouTube for posterity if you want to go back and look at any of the details of the stuff that I did. Obviously, take your time and make things a little bit shinier and crisper, but trying to talk and work at the same time. You get the idea. Okay. Cool. Then if there are no questions, thanks for coming by tonight. Make sure to join us on Mondays for Sunset Rumming, Fridays for Gaming on the Deck, and not every Saturday, but most Saturdays for something like this or a cooking show, whatever we happen to be doing with our weekend. Thanks for coming by. See you later. This is where I try to find the end button on the screen. There it is.